Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining Supercharge Lambda with Hono. In the next 20 minutes, I'll show how Hono brings familiar TypeScript-first web pattern to AWS Lambda. Things like end-to-end typed RPC, project structure we can use in production, and so on. Let's get started. So this is first time for me to be reInvent. So are there any first-time reInvent attendees? Oh, thank you so much. Let me begin with introducing myself. I'm John Matsuda, prototyping solution architect for public sector Japan. And the framework I'm about to introduce, Hono, is also made in Japan. Day to day, I work with customers to build and validate prototypes on AWS. So I spend a lot of time with React, TypeScript, and Hono. So what I'll share today directly comes from our prototype team does. Mike. Here's the plan. Why Hono for Lambda? First, why Hono for Lambda? Second, a quick overview of Hono, what it looks like, and how it runs on Lambda. And finally, I'll explain Hono's strengths. Please note that we'll not cover the detailed architecture of Hono itself. To ground why, let me begin with the sentence I hear again and again. I want to deploy a web app or API on Lambda. Does this resonate with you, or have you heard the same from your teammates or customers? There are a couple of passes people try first. I'll walk through them so we can see where the friction comes from and how Hono helps. First, let's see traditional approach. Routing in API gateway and multiple single-purpose Lambda behind it. It's great for isolation and clear ownership. However, for teams coming from parts of a traditional web framework, this model can feel a bit foreign. Routing lives at the edge, and logic is split across multiple functions. On the other hand, we increasingly see the Lambda-less pattern. Do you know Lambda-less pattern? One Lambda that owns routing and multiple functionalities. This is often paired with Lambda function URL. With Lambda function URL, you can go even simpler with direct HTTPS endpoint. The right choice depends on your team boundary or team size or scaling needs. Regardless of the route you take, there's still some friction. Lambda handler and event shapes is not familiar with web standard request response pattern you expect. And the routing and glue code are like error handling and so on, often end with built from scratch. And finally, ecosystem fit. Even with a great service like Lambda Power Tools or API Gateway, it is not so common to build and run web application on Lambda compared to container-based stack. If that sounds familiar, you are in the right room. Then, to address the friction we just saw, the tool I want to put on the table is Hono. Hono gives us express like request response syntax you expect. TypeScript first, express like developer experience. From here, I'll start with minimal possible Hono app and show how it runs on Lambda and how we structure project and which plugins cover production needs. This is a minimal possible Hono app. You can see app.get and app.post. This API follows the conventional web framework like Express. If you haven't used Express before, if you have built web application, you can immediately guess what's happening. And next, c.json returns the response JSON, and c.req.json reads the request body. Does it seem easy now? Why does Hono pair well with Lambda? Let me highlight 3 representative reasons, not an exhaustive list. First, runtime abstraction. Once you write one Hono app, it runs across multiple runtimes. Second, the ecosystem. Hono has a lot of plugins and middlewares which covers the production needs. Third, lightweight by default. This means you can keep your code bundle small, and especially for Lambda, you can reduce code start impact. So let's check Hono's runtime abstraction. Hono's runtime abstraction looks like this. One Hono app at the top, and underneath is environment. Node.js, Dino, AWS Lambda, and plenty more runtimes are supported with Hono. With Node.js adapter, you can locally spin up the dev server, and you can deploy it to container-based stack like ECS. And of course, you can use our AWS Lambda adapter with AWS Lambda. Because the Hono app is same everywhere, you don't need to fork or rewrite code per environment. So let's check the code changes to run Hono on Lambda. The code change is tiny, just 2 lines. I import handle from at Hono AWS Lambda package and wrap Jap with it. Just adding 2 lines, turn Hono app into a Lambda handler. At this moment, your Hono app works as a first-class runtime Lambda handler. We've just seen that turning Hono app into Lambda handler just takes 2 lines. Building on that runtime abstraction, the project structure I recommend for debugging Lambda locally is like this. This is actually I use for daily prototyping work. I keep 3 small files. First, in app.ts, I write domain logic and export the Hono app itself. And the second file, handler.ts, imports the Hono app from app.ts and export it as a Lambda handler with Hono AWS Lambda package we just saw. And finally, index.ts also imports the Hono app from app.ts and run it as a Node.js server with Hono Node Server plugin. In day-to-day work, I just run tsx index -- watch. Then I see how to load local dev server. When it's time to ship, I point in handler.ts and pack it to deployment for Lambda. The next, Hono's ecosystem. Hono's ecosystem covers the production needs most teams ask for. For documentation, Hono's Open API. Hono's Open API generates Open API schema from Zot. Zot is a very famous library for input validation in TypeScript ecosystem. And if you want end-to-end types, you can use Hono client, also called Hono RPC. This generates typed HTTP client from server-side code. And if you just want input validator, not Open API schema, you can use Hono Zot validator. This covers the simple type-safe validation. And if you need authentication, there are plenty plugins like Hono or OS provider. And lately, some people say they want to build their own MCP server. With Hono, you can use Hono MCP plugin. You can easily build MCP server with Hono with this plugin. From that list, we'll dive deep into these two plugins, Hono.OpenAPI and Hono Client. First, let's check Hono.OpenAPI. On this div, you can serve OpenAPI.json. Let's check the code div. Import OpenAPI Hono instead of normal Hono, and use it as a Hono app instead of normal Hono. And you should replace app.get into app.openapi and hello root. Hello root is a return value of the create root, and it includes the path and the schema. So then, publishing is simple. Add app.doc in one place, and you can serve openapi.json like this. This spec works out of box, so you can use it with client SDK generators or documentation site. Lately, you can even feed it LLM to spin up a simple front end. The key is schema is always in sync with what the server serves. So, and in the next slide, I'll introduce one more plugin, Scala Hono API reference. With this plugin, you can see the OpenAPI as an interactive UI provided by Scala. Just adding app.get Scala. So in this UI, you can call API directory, of course, and you can copy car code and Ruby, Node.js, PHP, Python, and so on. So you can try testing API easily from here. And next one is Hono RPC, Hono Client, also called Hono RPC. This is a video clip. I'll play once and rewind to the key moment. I type const res equal await client dot hello dot get, and the key moment is in the key moment is here. When I type client and hello, the IDE offers the completion like hello or $get. This is not a guess, but contract. So let's check how Hono RPC works. If you want to use Hono RPC, your project structure looks like this. The Lambda directory has a server-side code, and the front-end directory has a front-end code. And export app type from app.ts, which is a server-side code. And type of routes means like type of what server serves. And client.ts imports the app type and pass it to HC. This is our abbreviation of Hono client. So this is designed to be used in a monorepo structure in mind. the autocomplete we just saw is not a guess, but contract, and it works as a TypeScript type check. So if I long pass or request parameter, the IDE or compiler catch it before any network calls. So this is a great update for our daily development work. Finally, we saw the three things expressed like friendly syntax and runtime abstraction and rich ecosystem. With all that, Hono is still right way. Of course, our final size depends on your code or your dependencies. The base Hono package is around 10 kilobytes. And before we wrap up, let's address potential question. A comparison with Lambda Web Adapter. The main difference is shown here. I won't read them through, but if we want to prioritize the developer experience or start building a new app development with TypeScript, I recommend you Hono with Lambda. On the other hand, if you have already built a web application running on other languages or other frameworks, and you want to migrate it, I recommend you Lambda Web Adapter. So quick wrap up. With Hono on Lambda, you get a familiar DX, express like routing, web framework ergonomics, and Hono app is portable. If you want to move away from Lambda, you can easily go to the container-based stack or EC2 or something like that. And Hono has a abundant ecosystem. I just introduced 2 plugins, but there are plenty more plugins. So I'm sure there is something you want. And it says lightweight. A baseline bundle is around 12 kilobytes. So cold start impact stays small. So you can try Hono on Lambda after this session. Thank you for joining us. Please complete the session survey in mobile app. Thank you for joining.